Hey there guys, what's going on? Geoff Goodman has been a seriously busy boy over on the Overwatch forums and has been discussing the upcoming Symmetra Rework with some of the community. By the looks of some of these posts, she's receiving basically a complete overhaul with some new weapon design, a new ult, and some abilities have been switched from ultimates to just standard abilities. Starting us off, a user was just looking for clarification about the movement of Symmetra to the defense or support categories, and Geoff replied to this with, "We've currently moved her to defense. We tried a healer version which had her turrets healing instead of dealing damage, but it felt super awkward, especially with how fast Overwatch moves." So right, there's confirmation that Symmetra will be moving from the support category to defense. Most people, including myself, thought this should have been the case anyway, but other games tend to play a little bit fast and loose with the term support than Overwatch does. As in MOBAs and similar games, more classified crowd control into a support category as well. So this is actually a pretty good start. This will at least make it a little bit more obvious to, say, new players, for example, that Symmetra isn't a healer. They should probably just change the support role to healer, but of course that's a topic for another day. He then goes on to discuss a change to Sim's turrets and the way that they deploy, stating that said, we're playing with a new way her turrets deploy. Instead of having to stick them directly onto a wall herself, she can now fire an undeployed version like a projectile which sticks to walls and ceilings. And once it sticks, it will unfold like it does on a wall currently when she builds them. This is actually very cool, and according to another post by Geoff, these fire in a straight line at a fairly decent speed. This is most similar probably to a Widow Mine, except for no arc, it just fires in a straight line. And basically just these initial changes make her a lot easier to play on offense because you can shoot turrets behind an enemy, forcing them out of position. Say, think about it on Hanamura first point. If you shoot turrets behind, say where the enemy have got their shield set up, they'll be forced to move or either shoot them or they'll just continue to get shot. So this should help her play on offense. Geoff then goes on to discuss the new functionality of the turrets. And I quote, "No, there are changes to her turrets as well. We've lowered the max number to 3, both that she can hold and that can be deployed, but we've increased their damage and slow potential. They also have 30 health currently, though that number will probably change over time as we test. They still die quite easily, but there is a significant difference between dying to any damage and just having very low health." Already, this seems like a fairly significant change in its own right, as in just making the turrets be able to be placed in a more difficult area for people to actually need to react to them rather than having a trap set up. Even that makes more significant difference to Symmetra's actual playstyle. Normally you'd have to set up a trap, you only be able to play on defense and so on. Basically, you can be more proactive with the turrets now. Another user seemed a little bit confused as how making the number of turrets smaller would actually help Symmetra, but Geoff also stated that so far we've found the turrets to be much more powerful this way, not less. Keep in mind, it's almost like you're deploying 2 turrets at a time now, since they are more powerful individually. You do lose a little bit of map coverage, but overall the turrets are actually more powerful and impactful, not less. Plus, spending less time redeploying turrets frees you up to do other things at the same time, rather than spending so much focus on moving around trying to keep your turret nest up somewhere useful. And yeah, as we discussed, basically making the turrets more powerful and able to be fired in a different way, ultimately makes her more useful. But not only are Symmetra's turrets being changed, they're also altering her weapon, as I mentioned earlier. Basically, they are still trying to test whether this is the right thing to do, but basically at the moment, primary fire has been changed to not lock onto a target, but work as a straight beam that is fairly thick and has increased range. So probably think most similar to Zarya, but maybe a little bit thicker. The weapon still has the potential to gain damage by dealing damage like it does now, but instead of going 30, 60, 120 DPS, it is currently 65, 130, and 195 DPS. This is actually a big deal. That's a big change. It does also take 2 seconds of combined damage to level up to the next tier, so it'll take about 4 seconds to get to 195 damage, but this has also changed from 1 second as well. But this does mean the weapon has significantly more potential, but it is more difficult to get it up to max power. Also, when hitting a barrier, it currently generates ammo instead of consuming it. This means not only is she good at taking down barriers themselves, but is she just as good at generating charge off the barriers and using that charge to take down enemies as well. Okay, so a lot of information to process there. Basically what they're saying is they're making Sim not an auto-lock character anymore, which is basically a blessing. This game shouldn't have auto-lock characters. It just doesn't function well in a game with flankers and you want people to flank around the back and you just have a character that you don't have to aim with. Like, you can just lock on, you deal fucking used to do fat damage like 30, 60, and 120 DPS after 2 seconds. 120 DPS after 2 seconds is dumb. Like, you could kill someone in 3 seconds as Symmetra. That's silly. Now you're obviously going to be able to kill people faster, but auto lock isn't a thing, so you're actually going to have to track enemies and stuff like that. And this did receive, or has received, lots of flame by Symmetra mains, basically stating that, oh, we don't really want to aim, we want to just have the lock-on or the auto-lock-on thing and just go about our business, have a fun time, not have to worry about aiming, and don't be lazy. Like, come on, you're supposed to want to try hard. You shouldn't be in such a position where you can get a maximum performance out of putting in pretty minimal effort. So I think that the taking out the auto-lock is actually a very, very good thing. But also the change to actually make her be very, very effective against barriers is kind of a big deal. Like, the fact that she can just shred barriers, and I'm assuming that the damage still ramps up when you're firing at a barrier, so Reinhardt's going to get rinsed by this. All barrier shields are just going to get rinsed by new Symmetra just walking in, holding left click. Barrier's going to be gone, she's not consuming ammo, and then she can just rinse down the enemies as well. It's actually going to be really, really powerful. They've also made some changes to her ult's fire, but it is still a charge up large projectile, but it has a bunch of important changes. First off, if it charges to max charge in 1 second, down from 2 seconds, and the projectile speed has been increased significantly. Currently, it's changed from 10 meters a second to 30 meters a second. That's really fast. Lastly, instead of piercing enemies, it now just impacts enemies and environment and explodes, dealing area damage around it. And again, you could probably most similarly compare this to Zarya's right click. Basically, she'll charge up a big right click with about 1 second, and then you let it go and it'll explode, deal a lot of damage. And a direct shot now hovers in about an area of 130-ish damage, with a large percentage coming of the direct impact rather than the explosion. I saw some comments on the forums as well about people weren't really happy about this either, basically stating that her right click going through shields was kind of a little bit of a big deal in sort of fighting against bunker shield comps and stuff like that, but it can't really have been that big of a deal, especially since Symmetra wasn't getting picked at all to try and shred down these bunker comps, trying to shoot right-click balls through like a solid area. It can't be that effective, so making it seemingly more effective by like adding the explosion onto it should actually make the weapon usable. Like, the right-click will still be very, very usable, and even the left-click is going to be very powerful. So the weapon actually seems to be in a very, very good spot, especially with these changes. But, of course, as with everything else that I'm about to say, and everything that I've said before, this is all subject to change. Basically, it's not even on the PTR yet. It's still going to be subject to change. They just wanted to give us an insight into what was going on. But we do still have more changes still. Her teleporter is now moving to her E ability, and the photon barrier is moving to her ultimate. But these also have changes as well. The teleporter now works as follows. You place the exit like you'd normally do, except you can place it up to 25 meters away. So basically, if you want to set it up on the high ground, which is what most people are thinking about using it, you set the exit up on the high ground and the entrance forms in front of you, and then everyone sort of walks through it, jumps up on the high ground that you can't normally get to, say with slower characters that don't want to just wall climb and stuff like that. Makes getting onto the high ground or taking more high ground actually very, very easy. It only lasts a short time, but allies can use it freely as they normally do, but there are some things that can teleport as well. They are currently experimenting what works and what doesn't, but you can currently teleport things such as Torbjorn turrets, D.va's bombs, Junkrat tires, etc. This has led to some sneaky fun plays that are actually very, very unique. It also allows you to get onto high ground, as I mentioned already, with a comp that might otherwise have trouble doing so. The health has been lowered to 300, and the entrance is now attackable as well. If either die, the other is destroyed. So, this is actually a very, very big deal. You want the immobile characters, the characters that are hard to move, slow, take a long time to be on that high ground. You want to be holding the high ground as much as possible. So, basically this functions as, many people are describing it as a ramp, basically. You put the teleporter exit on the high ground, everyone walks through, you immediately take that high ground off the enemy. People can still destroy it, but say you're attacking Volsky as second, instead of having to wait for the lift elevator to go up and down, you put your teleporter behind the pillar thing that's on the high ground, everyone walks through, you take that high ground, you have better angle on the enemy. This is actually a very, very big deal. This is going to make this is actually probably going to be very, very meta changing in such that these immobile characters are going to be more mobile than ever before. They're going to be able to take up better positions and move around a lot more freely, especially just with these teleporter changes alone. And as I mentioned already, her photon barrier has moved to her ultimate ability and is now very different as well. Instead of placing a moving barrier, she now places a static barrier wall that is effectively infinite in size and has 5,000 health. She places this wall much like Mei places her ice wall, which means you can place it at some range and you can also change the orientation. This has me puzzled a little bit. This seems strange. Like, it seems like just plonking a big wall down in the middle of the zone doesn't seem that useful, but when you think about it, like, using this in such a way to sort of separate off the point, like most people use an ice wall. You can block big ultimates, stuff like that. You get the wall in the right spot, it's actually going to be very, very good. You block off a high ground from the enemy is something I just came up with. Then you block off the high ground, they have to move towards you. Basically, you're all set up defending and stuff like that. It forces an engagement. The shield doesn't sort of, or seemingly doesn't protect you in a way. It basically forces the enemy to engage with you. Otherwise, they won't be able to shoot through it. 5,000 health is that's a lot. Like, that's 2.5 Reinhardt shields. That's a lot of health to actually shoot through. So basically, it'll end up forcing engagement. Basically, people will have to run through it if they actually want to fight, or they'll have to wait it out, which I'm not even sure if it goes away. You might have to destroy it for it to leave, or you might just have to walk through it. It's not really clear on some of the numbers, timers, and stuff like that, because this is still very, very early. But yeah, they've only started working on some of the animations and visuals and sounds, so it is a little way off. But yeah, hopefully this is going to be very, very cool changes. Another interesting use of the Photon Barrier ultimate is to basically place it in spawn, and then it'll separate the map, because it's infinite. It just continues to go all the way across maps. It spans across the map, as you can see in this little bit of Geoff quote here. You can put it in your spawn, like a Hanzo ult, and it'll just stretch across the whole map. It'll separate up a battlefield, especially if you need, say, you're trying to defend a last point. You want to have that barrier split off the enemies and your guys. You want to stay on one side of the shield, the other side. It'll make it easy to defend the point. That's actually really cool. Like, this is actually sounding like a very, very cool change that is going to make Symmetra way more viable than she was before. Like, I know that they also already did a Symmetra Rework, but it still didn't have much of an impact, and she was still basically unpickable on anything but sometimes first point defense if you got away with it. Like, so in summary, a little bit of a long update video, but I would just wanted to let you guys know about these upcoming Symmetra changes that haven't even gone on to the PTR yet, but are seemingly closer than they were maybe a week, 2 weeks ago. So anyway, this has been Luke from Less Than Average Gaming, and I hope you guys do have an above average day, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye!